So it's finally happening, and I believe that by the time this video is out, it would be complete. Yes, I'm talking about the Russian invasion and attack on Ukraine, and while many are calling it a war, the facts on the ground narrate a completely different story. It's not a war, it's a one-way massacre by the Russians, and while Ukraine is fighting, is struggling, this is more of a struggle for pride and not a struggle to win. Putin has put out messages, Putin has put out warnings stating that if the West tries to interfere, it will face quote unquote consequences. But while the entire world is in a state of chaos, we have many questions on our minds, I'll primarily try to answer two of the most heated questions. The first one being, why does Russia want Ukraine so bad? The second being, where is the UN? What is the United Nations doing? Well, let's get into the video. My name is Ishan Fauzdar and you are watching the Upfront. So there are primarily two reasons that I could identify on why Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, the first reason is historical. The second reason is part geopolitical and part emotional. Let me break it down to you. There once existed a loose Slavic federation called the Kievan Rus, and it was situated at the location which we today call Ukraine. And it is believed that from this federation, Kievan Rus, the entire Slavic dynasty generated. It is from this place that USSR drew its historical roots, and it is from this place that the entire Soviet Union and Russia got its historical significance from. It is from this place that the entire Slavic race originated, and therefore you would understand that USSR and Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine have a lot of cultural heritage, have a lot in common. Now, but USSR was obviously a part of Ukraine and was supposed to be an intrinsic part of it because of its historical significance. However, when USSR disintegrated as it did in 1989, Ukraine and many other states became independent nations. However, Ukraine and Russia had a lot in common because of their historical significance. There was a lot of common heritage, and hence, even after the borders got divided, the cultural heritage didn't, and therefore Putin still feels that Ukraine is an intrinsic part of Russia. In fact, Putin was so devastated by USSR's disintegration that it called the disintegration of USSR the biggest catastrophe of the 20th century. And guess what else happened in 20th century? 2 world wars, 1 Holocaust, and many other genocides. Yugoslavia, for example, Kosovo, Rwanda, for example. So even after these, Putin felt that the disintegration of USSR was the biggest catastrophe, and hence you could understand how emotionally attached Putin is. And therefore, coming back to Putin, to turn back this disaster, this catastrophe, Putin wants to put USSR back, and this is not the first. Ukraine is obviously a part of the plan, but this is not the first time Russia has gone ahead and invaded a territory. In 2014, Russia invaded Crimea, which was a part of Ukraine, and turned it into Russian territory. So this was the historical reason. Now we come to the second reason, and the second reason is self-explanatory in one word: NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, NATO was a military alliance which was formed between USA, Canada and Europe to counter USSR. However, after USSR's disintegration, NATO offered its membership to many of the states that got independent after USSR disintegration. Now, many of these states, these newly independent states, did join NATO, and many of them also joined European Union. So Russia, now you could understand that NATO was knocking on the doors of Russia, and this was very devastating for Russia because first of all, it lost a lot of territory after disintegration, and second of all, these territories were now becoming allies with the West, were now becoming friends of the West, and hence it created a huge geopolitical danger for Russia because it was being surrounded by the West, and this was a geopolitical danger. And while Ukraine did not become a part of NATO, it did flirt with the idea of becoming a part of NATO. And in a poll, it was revealed that 6 out of the 6 out of every 10 people of Ukraine supported the idea of joining NATO. In another evidence of Ukraine's flirting with the West would be that Ukraine elected a pro-Western party to power in the recent elections. Now, obviously, as you would understand, Putin was devastated by these developments, and Putin was devastated primarily because of the geopolitical reasons, obviously. But he also had an emotional attachment with Ukraine, and therefore Putin went ahead to say on record that NATO's eastward expansion was one of the reasons why he invaded or is invading Ukraine. And you would also, while stopping NATO might be a geopolitical argument, but you would also see how dedicatedly, romantically engaged Putin is with Ukraine and with the romantic idea of putting back USSR. And Putin genuinely feels that Ukraine and all the other states of USSR, the former USSR, are being enslaved by the West, and that he, being the liberator, would liberate these states by invading them. Now let's come to the current situation, what's happening in the global community. Now a lot of things are happening, but nothing remarkable. The United States has said that it would respond to the Russian aggression along with its allies, and that Putin alone is responsible for the war. And US has said that it will respond, but there has been no response yet till the date this video is being recorded. And the only response which we have had is in the form of sanctions. There have been many sanctions. European Union has imposed pretty stringent sanctions on Russia. Britain has also imposed pretty decent, very strict sanctions on Russia, but these sanctions do not have any, or are not having any immediate impact. As for the United Nations, a special meeting of the United Nations Security Council has been convened in light of the Ukraine situation, and the Secretary General has appealed Putin to turn back his troops. However, it is impossible not to ask why the United Nations is not intervening, or why NATO is not intervening. Now, I can give you the diplomatic answer, which would be unjustified, but it is only fair that we understand the answer that the international community, UN wants to give. The answer is that no country or no organization can unilaterally intervene in an international dispute. And this may be bizarre when this may be a bizarre argument, because then you can ask me, how did US or the NATO, how did NATO invade, or how did NATO intervene in Kosovo without the United Nations Security Council mandate? Now, yes, NATO did intervene in Kosovo without UNSC mandate, but after that incident, the concept of humanitarian intervention or the responsibility to protect has changed. The global policy has changed, and this change happened primarily after the Security Council's intervention in Libya. So let me give you a small breakdown of what happened in Libya. So in Libya, the state machinery broke down, and the then dictator of Libya, Gaddafi, started inflicting human rights violation on the citizens of the state. And hence, in the lieu of this, the Security Council mandated UN forces led by USA to impose a no-fly zone over Libya. Now, while this was mandated by the Security Council, a resolution was passed. It is accused, Russia, China, and even India accused the UN forces led by US to have gone ahead of this council resolution. They accuse the US forces to have gone ahead of the resolution, to have fought with the state forces, and to have changed the regime of the state. So the UN the UN forces led by US are accused of using the humanitarian intervention for regime changes for their own benefits. And hence, after this incident and after many other uh, unfair use of humanitarian intervention by US, such as the infamous case of Iraq, the responsibility to protect or the humanitarian intervention policy was changed, and it was agreed upon by the United Nations that intervention will only be legal and legitimate if it is mandated by the Security Council. So this is the explanation on why UN is not doing anything. UN is not doing anything because, as you would understand, the Security Council has to pass a resolution against Russia and to intervene in Ukraine, and that would not happen because Russia is a P5 and it would veto permanent member, or one of the 5 permanent members. Russia is one of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, and it would veto if such a resolution is brought in the council. Therefore, the United Nations is not or cannot do anything. But that justification is not sufficient, because we have seen in many cases that US has dismantled international law in it when it comes to its own benefits. We have also seen we can also recognize that the Russian aggression against Ukraine is against the UN Charter, is against international law. However, instead of making memes, instead of criticizing, obviously it is important to criticize the United Nations, but instead of making memes, we should understand, we should think about a solution or suggested solutions which may be adopted. And what I believe, what this crisis has brought to the front, and what is most needed is reforms in the United Nations, and especially in the Security Council. Now, there are many recommendations on how to reform the United Nations. There are recommendations that the veto power should be neutralized, should be diluted to some extent. It is also remarked that there should be an expansion of the Security Council, and I believe that one of the most important reforms that we need to have right now is the expansion of the permanent members and even the entire council of the Security Council, and the dilution of veto. In fact, if there is not a dilution of veto, then the 5 permanent members should be changed. India has been bidding for the permanent seat in the Security Council for a long time, and it is high time that we recognize that the permanent members that we have now do not represent world hegemony, do not represent the world power dynamics, and hence we need a change. So the primary change is obviously the enlargement of the council with the enlargement of the P5, the change of the P5, and to which India stands obviously as a representative, as a contender. Now, when we talk about India, India has put on a very neutral stance. It has not criticized Russia, but it has criticized the violence, it has criticized war, and we know that the Ukrainian foreign minister has appealed to the Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi, to talk to Putin, because Putin is obviously, it seems that he is on good terms with Prime Minister Modi. Now, Prime Minister has, as of this moment, I just read that the Prime Minister has talked with Putin, and he has appealed to Putin to stop the violence, to stop human rights violations, and to stop the aggression in Ukraine. But we still do not have a solid Indian position on this matter. I hope you like this video. If you did like it, please do please do press the like button. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you receive regular updates on whenever we upload a new video. See you in the next video. Thank you so much.